Mr. Morel here, and we are finishing up our learning about functions for this unit before we really start talking about functions for the rest of the trimester. So here's the deal: is we're going to start writing, instead of writing the letter Y, we're graduating from Y, and we are going to be writing f of x. I know that's really confusing because you really want to read that as f times x, but it's not that way. And it also seems super stupid that we would be writing f of x instead of just the letter y, and I can see why that's confusing, and sometimes it's even confusing for me as your teacher. But there are reasons for it, and I hope that as we go on throughout the year, usually what happens is that my students say, oh my gosh, this is so much easier to write f of x. It usually just takes a good amount of time. But it's something that we're going to just practice a lot. So here we go. The reason why we write f of x, well, one of the reasons is because it allows us to have a new way of writing an input and an output together. So far we've done that with tables and graphs and maps and ordered pairs. And this allows us to have a new way of writing things together that's kind of like an ordered pair. So these level 1 questions are kind of trying to get you to practice that. So for example, in number 1 where it says f of negative 5 equals 3, that's the same way of writing negative, or that means the same thing as writing negative 5 and 3. Negative 5 is your input, and 3 is your output. In other words, negative 5 is your x value, and 3 is your y value. Alright, so let's look at question 2. Question 2, we have an ordered pair, and we need to write that in function notation. So there's our input, 0 is our output, so the way we would write that is f of 3 equals 0. In other words, if I put a 3 into my function machine, okay, and I kind of describe this almost like an easy bake oven with the little window that we like to look at when we're making our cookies. So we put 3 in, and we're going to get a 0 out. So for question 3, f of 2 equals negative 1 is the exact same as saying, hey, our x value is 2, our y value is negative 1. For 0, 0, well, that's the same as f of 0 equals 0. Then for question 5, f of 5 equals 1 means that we've got x value of 5 and a y value of 1. Then the ordered pair negative 4, negative 2, we would write that f of negative 4 equals negative 2. Okay, let's go ahead and show you how this is done. And we're going to make sure we show our work as we go, because doing this in our head is kind of silly. F of negative 1, what that means is that our x value is negative 1. You kind of see how there's an x in the window there, so I'm going to take out all of the x's and put a negative 1 in their place. So it's kind of a different way for me to say, hey, what's the y value when x equals negative 1? This is a much faster way to say that. So we've got f of negative 1, again I take out the x and I put a negative 1 in its place, equals 2 times negative 1 minus 1. So f of negative 1 is going to equal negative 2 minus 1, and therefore f of negative 1 equals negative 3. So f of negative 1 equals negative 3. Let's go ahead and look at f of 1. So I'm going to take out the x's and put 1's in their place. So f of 1 is going to equal 2 minus 1. So therefore f of 1 equals a 1. Alright, let's go ahead and look at question 8. I'll do B and D on this one. So here we have a new function. It's the function g. So I want to take out the x's in g and put zeros in their place. Well, negative 4 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 2 is just 2. So I know that when I put a 0 into my function that's g, that it's going to kick out a 2. Well, let's go ahead and see what happens when I put a 2 into my function g. So I've got g of 2, which equals negative 4 times 2 plus 2. So that would be negative 8 plus 2, which is negative 6. So if I put a 2 into that machine, I'm going to get a negative 6 kicked out. Alright, let's go ahead and look at question 9. So for question 9, if I put a 0 into my machine, I want to see what gets kicked out. Now this is going to look a little bit different. You've got to remember your order of operations especially. I'll write those order of operations here. Don't forget it's parentheses, exponent, which we're about to see, multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction. So I'm going to put h of 0 equals 3 times 2 to the 0 power. There's no parentheses here, but there is an exponent. So 2 to the 0th power. Use your calculator if you don't remember this, but any number to the 0th power is just 1. So h of 0 is going to equal 3 times 1, which equals 3. So if I put a 0 into this machine, I'm going to get a 3 kicked out. It's kind of weird. Alright, let's go ahead and try with a 2. So h of 2 is going to equal 3 times 2 to the 2nd power. Exponents first, that would be 3 times 4, which would equal 12. So if I put a 2 into this machine, I get a 12 out of it. Let's go on to the back and look at some stuff on the back, and it's going to want us to be very specific and careful. Specifically, I'm going to help you with 10a and then 11h. So for 10a, we got a new function f, and this time we're going to put a negative 2 in. Now you want to be very careful when you put this negative 2 in. Usually, if I'm ever writing with functions, anytime I take out the x, I feel like I need to put parentheses around it, especially if there's something directly connected to it. And the reason why this is important here is because negative 2 squared means that I've got negative 2 times negative 2, which is a positive 4. So the answer to that is a positive 4, but the reason why I say those parentheses are so important is because if you get your calculator and you type negative 2 squared, and then you push enter, well, according to order of operations, here's what's going to happen. It's going to take, it doesn't read this as negative 2 squared. It's going to do 2 squared, and then tack a negative onto it at the end. So if you type negative 2 squared into your calculator without any parentheses, it's going to tell you negative 4. And that's not true, because we would need negative 2 times negative 2, which is a positive 4. Alright, so that's your help on that one. Let's go to question 11, new function g. Oh, now this is a little confusing, because it's not telling me how much x is, it's telling me how much g of x is. But this is kind of like a basic substitution. I know how much g of x is, so I could take out the g of x and put a negative 50 in its place. What that's telling me is, hey, it wants to know what the x value needs to be in order for the machine to kick out a negative 50. So why don't we do that? I'm going to take out the g of x and put a negative 50 in its place, because that's how much I know that already. That's kind of like a substitution problem. And then to solve for x, I divide both sides by 2. And what that's saying is, hey, if you really want to get a negative 50 out of your machine, you've got to plug in a negative 25. And you can always go through and double check that. Is it true? Oops, that g of negative 25 equals negative 50. Well, let's double check. I'm going to plug it in. And 2 times negative 25 is negative 50. So yeah, if I really want to get a negative 50 out of my machine, I need to put a negative 25 into the machine. Alright, so yeah, you're going to be answering those basic same kinds of questions for level 4. Only notice that I have labeled this is F, this is G, this here is H, and this here is R. So as you go to answer question 12, f of 0 equals, well then that means you need to look at function f. And if you're looking at question 18 and you want to know what g of x equals 3, then you need to be focusing on the function g of x. Alright, I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope this unit has been amazing for you. And I will see you guys later. Bye.